There's something about the holidays that lingers long after the wrapping paper is gone and the tree lights fade. For many of us, it's not the presents we remember most, but the smells drifting from the kitchen, the warm spices, the tang of citrus, the richness of butter and sugar working their magic. Holiday cakes once held pride of place at the center of America's celebrations, towering on crystal stands or resting proudly on farmhouse tables. They were more than desserts. They were tradition, memory, and family history, baked into every layer. But time has a way of quietly reshaping our tables. Some cakes that once seemed timeless slowly slipped from view, replaced by shortcuts, box mixes, or simply by shifting tastes. A cake that once symbolized a family's pride could, in just a generation or two, vanish from the holiday spread. Today, we're taking a journey back to remember 20 classic holiday cakes that disappeared over time. From the grand Southern showstoppers to humble wartime creations, each one tells us something about the families who baked them, the eras that shaped them, and the way food has always been about more than just eating. Some will bring back personal memories. Others may feel like treasures you never knew existed. But all of them remind us of an America where holidays were marked not just by gifts, but by the joy of gathering around a table to share something made with care, patience, and love. So let's begin with one of the most iconic holiday cakes ever to grace a Southern Christmas table. Point 1. Lane Cake, Southern Christmas favorite. It was the cake so famous, it earned a mention in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. The Lane cake was born in Alabama in the late 1800s, created by Emma Rylander Lane. This towering white sponge cake was layered with a rich filling of raisins, pecans, coconut, and often drenched with bourbon or brandy. For decades, it was the crown jewel of Southern holiday gatherings, especially at Christmas, when its boozy warmth seemed to capture the spirit of celebration. Part dessert, part tradition, the Lane cake wasn't something you made casually. It was a project, a statement of skill and hospitality. Mothers and grandmothers guarded their recipes, often tweaking the filling to suit family tastes. To serve a Lane cake at Christmas was to show pride in your home and your heritage. But as decades passed, the Lane cake became a victim of its own complexity. Few had the time, or the patience, to craft it from scratch. Younger generations turned to quicker, easier desserts, leaving this once prized holiday centerpiece to fade quietly into memory. And yet, the Lane cake is only the beginning. Across America, holiday tables once carried cakes that were just as unique and just as forgotten. Let's look at the next sweet tradition that time nearly erased. Point 2. Black Cake, Caribbean American holiday tradition. For some families, Christmas didn't smell like cinnamon and pine, it smelled like rum-soaked fruit steeped for months. Black cake traces its roots to the Caribbean, where families would preserve fruits in dark rum and bake them into dense holiday cakes. As Caribbean immigrants came to America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they brought this tradition with them. In places like New York, Miami, and Boston, black cake became a centerpiece of Christmas tables in immigrant households. This wasn't just a dessert. It was heritage on a plate, every bite carrying the warmth of home across oceans. Families often began preparing the cake months in advance, soaking raisins, currants, and prunes in bottles of rum until they turned dark and glossy. The cake was rich, heavy, and deeply spiced, a symbol of patience, planning, and love. But outside of those tight-knit communities, black cake never became a mainstream holiday staple. As time passed, younger generations in America began turning to store-bought pies and boxed cakes, and the painstaking ritual of soaking fruit for months fell away. For many, the tradition survives only in faded recipe cards and family memories. Still, black cake wasn't the only holiday classic built on resourcefulness and patience. The next cake took a far stranger ingredient and turned it into something surprisingly festive. Point 3. Tomato Soup Spice Cake. It sounds like a joke, who would put tomato soup in a Christmas cake? But once upon a time, it was a holiday favorite. In the 1940s and 1950s, Campbell's tomato soup wasn't just a lunchbox staple, it was an unexpected baking ingredient. Housewives discovered that tomato soup added both moisture and a subtle tang to spice cakes, making it a thrifty yet tasty holiday dessert. Recipes spread in community cookbooks, and soon tomato soup cake was appearing at Christmas potlucks across the country. This quirky cake was a perfect example of mid-century ingenuity. With its mix of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, the tomato flavor disappeared entirely, leaving only a moist, tender crumb. Topped with cream cheese or spice frosting, it became a holiday surprise that delighted families with its secret ingredient. But as food trends shifted and convenience became king, tomato soup cake turned from a symbol of creativity into a punchline. For younger generations, the idea of soup in a cake felt too strange to bother with, and the once celebrated dessert quietly disappeared from holiday spreads. Of course, wartime and Depression-era kitchens produced more than quirky experiments, they created cakes born from pure necessity. And one of those was boiled, not baked. Point 4. Boiled raisin cake. Imagine celebrating Christmas without eggs, butter, or milk. For many families, that wasn't imagination, it was reality. During the Great Depression and both World Wars, rationing and poverty meant baking luxuries were hard to come by. That's when boiled raisin cake, also called poor man's cake or war cake, became a holiday standard. Cooks would simmer raisins, sugar, and spices together, then mix the thick syrup into flour and water to create a dense, sweet loaf. What this cake lacked in richness, it made up for in resourcefulness. Raisins provided natural sweetness, while boiling made them plump and juicy. Families could still place a homemade cake on the holiday table, even when butter and eggs were nowhere to be found. For many, the taste of boiled raisin cake became linked not just to Christmas, but to survival itself. Yet once prosperity returned, few wanted to remember those lean years through their desserts. The humble cake that once symbolized resilience faded, leaving only memories of hard times and simple joys. But not all forgotten cakes were born from scarcity. Some were dazzling centerpieces, layered with flavor and history, like the next holiday classic, which wasn't quite what its name suggested. Point 5. Japanese fruitcake, Southern New Year's specialty. Despite its name, this holiday cake had nothing to do with Japan, but it had everything to do with the American South. The Japanese fruitcake was a layered spice cake filled with coconut, citrus, and nuts. Popular from the late 19th century into the mid-20th, it became a New Year's staple across Southern households. Its Japanese name likely came from a fascination with exotic-sounding foods during that era, though the recipe itself was entirely American. This cake was a showpiece, standing tall on holiday tables with its snowy coconut topping and jewel-like fruit filling. Unlike dense British-style fruitcakes, it was lighter, more festive, and perfectly suited to Southern tastes. Families passed recipes down through generations, often reserving the cake for special occasions when loved ones returned home for the holidays. But as store-bought cakes and quicker desserts took over, the Japanese fruitcake began to vanish. Its elaborate preparation, requiring multiple layers, fillings, and frostings, simply felt impractical for modern kitchens. What once symbolized celebration slowly slipped into obscurity. And yet, the story of holiday cakes in America is one of color, creativity, and nostalgia. Now let's move to another festive creation that looked as much like Christmas wrapping as it did dessert. Point 6. Ribbon cake. Sometimes, the cake itself looked like a Christmas present, layered in stripes of red, green, and white. Ribbon cake became popular in the early to mid-20th century, especially for Christmas gatherings. It was a simple white cake batter divided and tinted with food coloring, then layered to create a striking ribbon effect once sliced. Some recipes even flavored each layer differently, vanilla for white, almond or cherry for pink, and mint or pistachio for green. Part of the magic of ribbon cake was the surprise inside. To cut into an ordinary-looking cake and reveal those cheerful stripes felt like opening a hidden gift. For children especially, it became a source of wonder, a sign that Christmas had truly arrived. But as food coloring fell out of fashion and boxed cake mixes offered quicker solutions, ribbon cake lost its charm. What once felt festive now seemed artificial, and the bright layers of Christmas slowly gave way to plainer, easier desserts. Of course, not all holiday cakes were meant to dazzle with color. Some carried centuries of history in their spiced, fruit-filled richness, like the one that began as a pie. Point 7. Mincemeat cake. Long before fruitcake jokes, there was mincemeat, and yes, it once included actual meat. Mincemeat pies were a British holiday tradition that crossed the Atlantic with early settlers. Over time, American cooks adapted the concept into cakes, replacing meat with dried fruits, spices, and sometimes suet. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, mincemeat cake had become a popular alternative to denser fruitcakes, especially around Christmas. This cake carried an air of tradition and old-world festivity. Its flavor, rich with cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and brandy, evoked both warmth and celebration. Families who baked mincemeat often considered it a sign of continuity, linking their holidays to generations past. But by the mid-20th century, changing tastes left mincemeat behind. The dense, spiced flavor that once symbolized festivity began to feel outdated. Today, only a few bakeries or older cookbooks keep the memory alive, while most Americans have never even tasted it. Still, while mincemeat faded, another holiday classic rose, one with ginger and spice, stacked high and filled with cream. Point 8. Gingerbread Layer Cake. We all know gingerbread cookies in houses, but once upon a time, gingerbread came in towering layers. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, gingerbread wasn't just a novelty treat. Bakers turned the spiced batter into full cakes, layering it with whipped cream, lemon curd, or molasses frosting. During Christmas gatherings, gingerbread layer cake became a centerpiece, offering the flavor of holiday spice in a more dramatic form than simple cookies. This cake captured the heart of the season, warm, spiced, and deeply comforting. Families prized it for its aroma as much as its taste. A gingerbread layer cake cooling on the counter was a sure sign the holidays were in full swing. But gingerbread's popularity narrowed over time. Cookies in houses stole the spotlight, leaving the layered cake behind. Today, few people even realize gingerbread once stood tall on holiday tables, as much a tradition as fruitcake or pie. Of course, spice wasn't the only way to sweeten a holiday cake. Sometimes, the answer came from something as simple and humble as applesauce. Point 9. Applesauce Spice Cake. It was moist, it was comforting, and it carried the faint sweetness of orchards into the holiday season. Applesauce cake rose to prominence during the early 20th century, especially during wartime rationing. Sugar and butter could be scarce, but applesauce provided natural sweetness and moisture. Cooks spiced it with cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, transforming a simple pantry staple into a holiday-worthy dessert. This cake wasn't just thrifty, it was delicious. For many families, especially in apple-growing regions, it became a cherished Christmas tradition. Some recipes even included raisins or nuts, making it hearty enough to stand as the centerpiece dessert. Yet as rationing ended and store-bought cakes grew abundant, applesauce cake lost its role. What once symbolized resilience and creativity was left behind in favor of more glamorous desserts. Today, its memory lingers mainly in vintage cookbooks and the kitchens of nostalgic bakers. But not every forgotten holiday cake came from scarcity. Some reflected the abundance and brightness of the season, like the citrus-laced sponge cakes of Florida's golden age. Point 10. Orange Sponge Cake. At a time when oranges were a luxury, a slice of orange sponge cake tasted like sunshine at Christmas. In the early 20th century, especially during the Florida land boom of the 1920s and 30s, oranges were marketed as the fruit of prosperity. Holiday recipes embraced them, and orange sponge cake became a festive favorite. Light, airy, and bursting with citrus zest, it stood apart from heavier spice and fruit cakes. The bright flavor of oranges brought a refreshing contrast to the richness of other holiday foods. For families in colder states, the taste of citrus felt like a winter luxury, a reminder of warmth and sunlight during the darkest days of the year. But as oranges became more commonplace, and as tastes shifted toward convenience, the cake's novelty faded. Today, orange sponge cake rarely makes an appearance on holiday tables, its sunny cheer replaced by more predictable desserts. Still, innovation never stopped. By the mid-20th century, a new kind of cake emerged, light, airy, and proudly marketed as the dessert of the modern holiday table. Point 11. Chiffon Holiday Cakes. It was the cake that promised to be so light, you'll think you're eating a cloud. Chiffon cake was invented in 1927 by Harry Baker, a Los Angeles insurance salesman turned caterer. The recipe was kept secret until General Mills bought it in 1947 and introduced it to America as the cake of the modern age. Light, airy, and versatile, chiffon became a holiday darling in the 1950s. Bakers flavored it with citrus, spices, or chocolate, decorating it for Christmas with whipped cream and fruit. Chiffon felt futuristic. It was lighter than pound cake, richer than angel food, and endlessly adaptable. In an era obsessed with new and modern, chiffon became the stylish centerpiece of many holiday parties. Housewives clipped the recipes from magazines and proudly served it as proof of their modern skills. But by the 1970s, chiffon faded. Convenience mixes and frozen desserts replaced it, and the patience required to whip egg whites and carefully fold them in felt old-fashioned. What was once cutting edge became just another page in a cookbook nobody opened anymore. Of course, chiffon was a luxury cake. Not every holiday table could afford such extravagance. Some cakes told the story of sacrifice, born from times of war. Point 12, War Cake, World War I and World War II Christmas Substitute. Imagine Christmas without sugar, butter, or eggs, and still finding a way to bake a cake. During World War I and II, rationing made holiday baking a challenge. Families turned to war cake, a dense, spiced loaf made without eggs, butter, or milk. Instead, it relied on boiled raisins, brown sugar substitutes, and spices for flavor. It was often baked at Christmas time, when families longed for something festive despite scarcity. War cake symbolized resilience. It proved that even in times of global crisis, families could gather around something sweet and share a sense of tradition. For children, it meant Christmas still felt like Christmas, even if the cake wasn't quite what they remembered. Yet when the wars ended, few wanted to return to war cake. Its flavor carried the memory of struggle, and it quickly disappeared from holiday tables. Today, only historians and vintage recipe enthusiasts bring it back, mostly as a reminder of how much people endured. Not every cake vanished forever, though. Some disappeared, only to re-emerge decades later, like one famous red Southern classic. Point 13, Red Velvet Cake, before its comeback. Long before it became a trendy bakery staple, red velvet was a fading holiday memory. Red velvet cake emerged in the early 20th century, especially in the American South. Its rich cocoa layers, tinged with buttermilk and vinegar, gained a subtle reddish hue. By the 1940s, recipes used red food coloring to emphasize the dramatic look, making it a striking choice for Christmas celebrations. This cake wasn't just delicious, it was theatrical. Its deep crimson layers, stacked with cream cheese or buttercream frosting, felt special and festive. For many Southern families, it was the crown jewel of Christmas dinners. But by the 1970s, red velvet had nearly disappeared. Food coloring fell out of favor, and younger generations saw it as outdated. It wasn't until the 2000s, thanks to cupcake shops and Instagram, that red velvet made its dramatic comeback, reborn as a modern classic. But not every cake was destined for revival. Some lived only in memory, like the old-fashioned pound cakes once drenched in brandy for the holidays. Point 14, Pound cake with brandy glaze. In the 19th century, no Christmas table was complete without a pound cake soaked in brandy. Pound cake earned its name from its simple recipe, a pound each of butter, sugar, eggs, and flour. At Christmas, bakers often enhanced it with brandy or sherry, brushing the glaze over the dense loaf until it gleamed. It was a holiday staple across America well into the early 20th century. This cake embodied tradition and abundance. It was rich, sturdy, and long-lasting, perfect for gifting or serving at large family gatherings. The brandy glaze made it festive, adding both flavor and preservation. But as holiday tastes shifted toward lighter cakes and trendier desserts, the humble brandy-soaked pound cake lost its place. Today, it lives on only in older cookbooks and the occasional Southern kitchen. Still, Christmas cakes weren't always brown, spiced, or heavy. Sometimes, they came as bright white towers, shimmering like snowdrifts on a holiday table. Point 15, Snowdrift Coconut Cake. Few cakes captured the magic of Christmas quite like the Snowdrift Coconut Cake, white on white, sparkling like winter itself. Popular in the early 20th century, this cake was a tall white sponge or butter cake covered in boiled frosting, then lavishly coated in shredded coconut. It earned its name because the fluffy coconut resembled a snowbank, making it a natural fit for winter holidays. The snowdrift cake was pure holiday theater. Its snowy appearance brought joy to children and elegance to any table. In an era before elaborate store-bought decorations, this cake felt magical, a reminder that food could look as festive as it tasted. But over time, coconut fell out of favor in many American kitchens, and the delicate boiled frosting became too fussy for modern bakers. The once iconic snow cake disappeared, leaving only old photographs and a trace of sweetness in memory. And yet, just as coconut faded, another dried fruit once took center stage in holiday baking: dates, packed into dense and sticky cakes now nearly forgotten. Point 16. Date nut cake. There was a time when nothing said Christmas quite like a sticky, rich loaf of dates and walnuts. Date nut cake surged in popularity in the early to mid-20th century, often appearing in holiday cookbooks and even boxed cake mixes from brands like Dromedary. It combined chopped dates, sugar, and nuts into a dense, sweet loaf that could be served plain or topped with cream cheese frosting. Dates were exotic yet accessible, and the cake itself was hearty, moist, and long-lasting. For many families, it became the go-to Christmas cake, easy enough to bake at home, but elegant enough to serve to company. Some families even mailed it to soldiers overseas, knowing it would keep well during the long trip. But as palates shifted, date nut cake became old-fashioned. Younger generations saw it as heavy and outdated, preferring lighter, flashier desserts. The boxed mixes disappeared from store shelves, and with them, the cake that once defined Christmas for countless households. Still, dates weren't the only unusual fruit to sweeten holiday tables. Another humble fruit, often seen as plain or even unfashionable, once had its moment in a spiced holiday cake. Point 17. Prune spice cake. It may sound surprising, but prunes once starred in one of America's favorite holiday cakes. In the early 1900s, prunes were a pantry staple, praised for their sweetness and long shelf life. Home bakers used them to create prune spice cake, a moist, fragrant cake spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. It was especially popular in rural areas and appeared frequently in Christmas cookbooks. Prunes gave the cake a deep, almost caramel-like sweetness, making it feel rich without being costly. For families who couldn't afford imported fruits or liquor-soaked cakes, prune spice cake was a holiday treat that still felt special. But as time went on, prunes gained a reputation as health food rather than festive food, linked more with digestion than celebration. The once beloved holiday cake faded, remembered only by older generations. While prune cake disappeared quietly, some holiday cakes remained tied to old-world traditions, especially those covered in rich almond marzipan. Point 18. Marzipan holiday cake. For immigrant families, nothing said Christmas quite like a cake wrapped in almond paste. Marzipan cakes trace their roots to Europe, particularly Germany and Scandinavia, where almond paste was molded into decorations or layered over dense fruit cakes. Immigrants brought these traditions to America in the 19th and early 20th centuries, baking marzipan-covered cakes for Christmas and New Year celebrations. Marzipan made cakes feel like works of art. Its smooth, pale surface could be decorated with festive designs, turning a simple fruitcake into a centerpiece. For families far from home, it was also a powerful reminder of heritage and cultural pride. But marzipan never caught on widely in America. Its strong almond flavor felt unusual to many, and its labor-intensive preparation discouraged casual bakers. Slowly, it became a rarity, seen more in specialty European bakeries than in American homes. Yet even as heavy fruitcakes declined, America embraced lighter cakes that carried symbolic meaning, like one sunny sponge that offered hope after years of war. Point 19. Sunshine cake. When the world was dark, America turned to a cake that promised brightness and hope. Sunshine cake emerged after World War II, during the late 1940s and 1950s. Similar to angel food but richer, it used whipped egg whites to achieve a delicate, airy texture. Its very name, sunshine, captured the post-war optimism of the era. For many families, it became a holiday tradition, baked at Christmas to symbolize brighter days ahead. This cake was light, cheerful, and easy to flavor with citrus zest. It stood in stark contrast to dense wartime make-do cakes. For families who had endured years of rationing, sunshine cake felt like a celebration of abundance and joy. But as the decades passed, its symbolic meaning faded. Sunshine cake became just another sponge, lacking the staying power of chocolate or spice cakes. Today, it exists mostly in mid-century cookbooks, a forgotten relic of a hopeful generation. Yet some holiday cakes found their glory not in symbolism, but in vibrant, seasonal flavors, like the tart burst of cranberries baked upside down in caramelized sugar. Point 20. Cranberry upside-down cake. It sparkled on the holiday table like a jewel, bright red cranberries glazed in golden caramel. Upside-down cakes became popular in the early 20th century, especially with the rise of canned pineapple. But in New England and the Midwest, cranberries soon took center stage, baked into festive upside-down cakes served at Thanksgiving and Christmas. The cake captured the season itself. Tart cranberries balanced the sweetness of caramelized sugar, while the ruby red topping looked as festive as holiday ornaments. For many families, it was a refreshing alternative to heavy fruitcakes. Yet as holiday traditions grew standardized, cranberry cakes were overshadowed by pies and cookies. What once felt seasonal and unique slowly slipped away, leaving only the pineapple version to endure in American memory. Still, long before pineapple claimed its spot, another holiday cake was famous not for its fruit, but for its fiery kick of whiskey. Point 21. Whiskey-soaked fruitcakes, homemade, not store-bought. Before fruitcake became the butt of holiday jokes, it was once the most treasured gift you could give. For centuries, homemade fruitcakes soaked in whiskey or brandy were a staple of Christmas. In America, families would bake them weeks in advance, wrapping them in cloth and brushing them with liquor to keep them moist. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, these fruitcakes were prized heirlooms, with recipes passed down through generations. These weren't the dry, store-bought bricks we laugh about today. Homemade fruitcakes were rich, fragrant, and deeply flavorful, packed with dried fruits and nuts. They lasted for months, making them perfect for gifting, mailing, or enjoying throughout the season. But when mass-produced fruitcakes flooded the market in the mid-20th century, the reputation of the cake soured. What was once a labor of love became a holiday punchline, leaving the homemade versions forgotten. But in the hills of Appalachia, another kind of layered holiday cake told a very different story, one of patience, community, and survival. Point 22. Molasses stack cake, Appalachian tradition. In Appalachia, Christmas wasn't just about gifts under the tree, it was about sharing slices of a cake built layer by layer. Molasses stack cake was born in the Appalachian Mountains during the 19th century. Made of thin layers of molasses-sweetened cake stacked high with spiced apple filling, it was often the centerpiece of holiday gatherings. Because ingredients were scarce, neighbors sometimes contributed a single layer each, assembling the cake as a community effort. The stacked cake symbolized generosity and togetherness. It wasn't just dessert, it was a story of families coming together to make something greater than any one of them could achieve alone. At Christmas time, it carried even deeper meaning. But as times modernized and baking became more accessible, the communal spirit of the stacked cake faded. What was once a symbol of unity became a relic, remembered mostly in regional cookbooks and oral histories. While Appalachia had its stacked cakes, the coastal South had another elegant holiday tradition, one so famous, it carried the name of a Southern belle. Point 23. Lady Baltimore cake. It was called the wedding cake of the South, but at Christmas, it was every hostess's pride. Lady Baltimore cake first gained fame in Charleston, South Carolina, in the late 1800s. A tall, white sponge filled with dried fruit, nuts, and sometimes sherry, it became a symbol of Southern elegance. By the early 20th century, it was widely known across America, often baked for holidays and special occasions. This cake wasn't just about taste, it was about refinement. Its snowy white appearance, paired with its luxurious fruit and nut filling, made it a showpiece. For many families, it became a Christmas tradition, representing grace, hospitality, and abundance. But as the century wore on, Lady Baltimore cake fell out of favor. Its old-fashioned flavors felt too fussy, and the time-consuming preparation lost its appeal. Today, it lingers mainly as a memory in Southern cookbooks. Of course, not all holiday cakes were refined and elegant. Some were rustic, dense, and tied to the fruits of the season, like a spiced cake made from ripe persimmons. Point 24. Persimmon pudding cake. For many Midwestern families, nothing said Christmas quite like the deep, caramel flavor of persimmon pudding cake. In rural America, particularly Indiana and surrounding states, persimmons were a treasured autumn fruit. Families turned the pulp into a dense, spiced pudding cake, often steamed or baked in cast-iron pans. At Christmas time, it became a rustic yet beloved holiday dessert. This cake carried the flavors of the land, rich, spiced, and deeply comforting. It was humble but meaningful, especially for families who relied on local harvests to shape their holiday tables. But persimmons were never widely available outside certain regions, and as processed desserts spread, the tradition faded. Today, persimmon pudding cake survives mostly at local festivals or in family kitchens, holding tight to old traditions. And finally, we arrive at one of the most dazzling mid-century holiday cakes, so bright and cheerful it looked like it belonged in a magazine ad. Point 25. Pineapple upside-down holiday cake. With its glossy pineapples and ruby-red cherries, this cake was once the star of every holiday potluck. The pineapple upside-down cake exploded in popularity in the 1920s, boosted by the Hawaiian Pineapple Company, later Dole, which promoted recipes nationwide. By the mid-20th century, it was a beloved holiday dessert, appearing on Christmas tables across America. This cake symbolized modernity and festivity. Canned pineapple made it accessible, while its vibrant appearance made it feel special. For families hosting Christmas parties, it was as much decoration as dessert. But like so many mid-century trends, its novelty faded. By the 1980s, pineapple upside-down cake was dismissed as dated, more likely to appear in retro cookbooks than on holiday menus. And with that, we close our journey through 25 holiday cakes that once defined America's celebrations, each one a story of time, tradition, and change. As we've seen, holiday cakes weren't just desserts. They were memories, carried in the flour-dusted hands of grandmothers, in the carefully guarded recipe cards tucked inside family Bibles, and in the laughter of children sneaking tastes of batter before the oven door closed. Each cake on this list, whether it was soaked in whiskey, stacked with apple filling, or shining with canned pineapple, tells a story of who we were and how we celebrated. They remind us that holidays were once about patience, effort, and the joy of creating something that would bring people together. But time moves on. Convenience replaced tradition. Old recipes grew dusty, and cakes that once stood proudly at the center of the table slowly disappeared. And yet, remembering them keeps them alive, even if only in spirit. Perhaps that's the true lesson here: food isn't just nourishment. It's heritage. It's the thread that connects us across generations, reminding us that even when a cake vanishes from the table, its memory still lingers in our hearts. So maybe this year, when you gather with your family, consider bringing back one of these forgotten cakes. Bake it, share it, and tell the story of where it came from. Because in doing so, you're not just serving dessert, you're keeping a piece of history alive. If you enjoyed this journey through America's holiday past, don't forget to subscribe. There are countless more stories waiting to be told, about the foods we loved, the traditions we cherished, and the world tapestry.